Hi, I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby, here with Tony winner Wayne Cilento, director of Bob Fosse's Dancin, currently on Broadway right this second. And the really special thing about this revival is your history with this piece, Wayne, because you starred in the original version of Dancin. I think it's 45 years ago at this point, and that was actually your first Tony nomination and your
Yeah.
only Tony nomination as a performer. You went on to be nominated and win another category. But what was your first kind of what memory do you keep with you from that first nomination back then?
Well, actually, it was my first performing
Yeah.
nomination. I never got any other ones, but I did get a couple other nominations before then. I got one for Baby. That was my first nomination. And then I did Jerry's Girls and a couple other things. I don't even remember what they were, but that doesn't diminish anything about getting a nomination in a big ensemble company and being picked out, and it was very special. But it kind of like showed what he did for me. I mean, he gave me everything. I mean, he really trusted me and had a big responsibility, but it paid off. I was very happy to have the responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my understanding was back then you were not a Fosse dancer at that point. Is that correct? So what was the process then of landing that job and learning his ways?
Um, I did audition for Chicago, and I didn't even make it to like the first pass. I was cut like immediately. So, but at that time, I was doing the first workshop of a chorus line. So I stuck with a chorus line, which is fine. That worked out great. And then I did chorus line. I went and I did the act with Liza, and at that time when he was auditioning everyone for Dancin, I was out of town in LA with Liza. And we came back, and then I got hooked up with Graciela Danielle, kind of said to Bob, you should see Wayne, blah, 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 blah. And one lunch I ran across the hall, and there was Bob and Ann and Gordon Harrell and the drummer, and we danced for 45 minutes. And I sang for him, and he shook my hand. I shook his hand, and he said, "Thank you very much." I said, "Thank you." I flew over to my rehearsal with the act, and long story short, I keep saying the same story, but I ran into him opening night party of the act, and he said, "I want you." And I said, "Want me?" He said, "Yeah, I want you for the show." And I said, "I thought it was cast." He said, "Don't worry about it. I'll figure it out." I said, "I'm in. Just don't tell Liza for a little bit." And that's history. It's interesting. I had a really blessed dancing career, and I danced for a lot of choreographers. And I have to say, I think the one thing that I was able to do was to really pick up their style. And so when I got Dancin, I was very tired because I was doubling. I was doubling in the night with the act, and I was rehearsing in the day. And I really just got really deep into myself, and I stood over to the side and I just watched Bob coming up with steps, teaching other people steps, pulling me on the floor, making me, do whatever he wanted me to do. And I just kind of had that ability of looking at him and kind of like mirroring what he was doing. And so I don't know. I mean, I guess you could say I'm a Fosse dancer. I still don't think I am, but I can do his style. And yet, the biggest thing I think that I had going for me was the fact that I didn't lose myself in his style. I kind of stayed true to myself as a dancer, and I think he respected that. And I feel like he encourages that. So even with the original company, I think he encouraged the fact they were all different dancers. Maybe some people dance for him, but maybe some people haven't. And he taught the combinations, and we all watched and we interpreted what we thought. And I guess if I didn't hear from him and someone wasn't like up my back saying I'm doing things wrong, I was in good shape. So I guess I was in good shape.
Clearly it worked out. So
Yeah.
would you say then that like when you were casting this revival, were you keeping that in mind of like, what would Fosse be looking at if he was, looking at these dancers auditioning? What would he be thinking?
I didn't really go down that road. I actually thought, for me, it was just finding the best, most unique dancers, performers that I could find to get a really interesting company. And I think with today's climate, that kind of encourages the fact that, the more the better, and it's ethnic and interesting. And so I was there. I know Bob loved leggy girls, but and there are girls that have really great legs in my company, our company. But I didn't concentrate on trying to find 6 girls that have beautiful legs and they were tall and gorgeous and stuff like that. Like I said, I was just looking for unique, really talented, beautiful people in a different way. And I just came up with this company, and I was really lucky too.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
what was it, would you say, that made you think, right, this is the time for this? What made you want to revisit this piece right now?
Well, I never really thought about redoing Dancin, to tell you the truth. But like 4 years ago, I did get a phone call asking me if I was interested in doing a revival of Dancing. And I thought about it for maybe 5 minutes, and I went, yeah, I would love to. That would be great. And so then the conversations kept on going. But in the meantime, after I hung up the phone, I went, oh, wow, okay. And at that point, it was like 41 years or something like that old. And I'm thinking, that's not going to make it. It's just not going to make it. It's 1978, 19. It was like we were debating 21, 22, 23. With COVID happened. We didn't know when it was going to happen. Thank God it happened in 23. I'm glad it happened in the spring as opposed to the fall, where I don't know, we weren't together yet. I think Broadway's coming back a little bit now. I think people are more relaxed going to the theater, so that's good. But my brain was like fried, because it's like, okay, dance concert format, 3 acts, that's not going to work. How do I make it a 2-act? What's the combination of numbers? Scratch sheets, throw that out, put another order down, throw that out, a lot of that. I also had the opportunity of dancing for Bob in Big Deal. And that was 8 years later. And it's really interesting. And I had been choreographing, and I had some Tony nominations under my belt, and I won for Tommy. And he called and he said, I'm doing a new show. Are you interested in doing it? I said, yes. I didn't even ask what the show was. And I stopped everything. And of course, I was out of shape, so bad, really out of shape. And I knew I had to get into shape. And I was like, I was right. Okay, fine, let's do this. And I had this experience to work with him again, and he's changed. I don't know if it was because of his film work or his approach to doing a musical, but it was all very fluid and integrated with scenes and music and underscoring, and then dance arrangements and dances and blending away. And again, I was a narrator with Bruce Anthony, so it was 2 of us that were like singing and dancing in between everything, pulling all of it together. I have to say, I think it was probably, and I did a lot, I think it was probably the best dancing I did in my whole career at that point, because I don't know, maybe because I was mature and I was confident in myself, and Bob was dancing in a different way. He was flying. There wasn't many isolated, very manipulated things. There was a number like that, but Bruce and I just flew. And I thought, explosive. He's just explosive. And yet he's not at times. So I'm kind of going all over the place. But anyway, getting back to that, I was happy I did that, but I saw that other side of him. So when Dancing came up, I thought, okay, I need to show the world, even if they don't know who Bob Fosse is, anyone that loves dance, they need to know that he is so eclectic and so stylistic in so many manners, that I wanted to show the broad scope of his talent. And so that was a driving Fosse. And then the scaffolding in the show, the set design, I wanted it to feel like all that jazz, and I wanted it to feel like it was a soundstage. And then inside the soundstage, there was, let's say, Bob filming Dancin. And so the conceptual idea was more about that, as opposed to doing a stage production. I was doing a film production that Bob Fosse would be doing. Sounds weird, doesn't it? But it made my head go in another direction, which was, it was a good thing.
Yeah, and it's exciting to see, I think, that piece from Big Deal that you put in there towards the end, because it's not a piece, that's not a piece we get to see as often as something like Chicago or Cabaret.
Right.
But there's several points in there where you kind of present things like recontextualizing things like the Dolly song.
Yeah.
How do you make a decision like that of where do we go the classic route and where do we kind of pull out something new?
Yeah, well, I kind of like played around with order, like I said, and then then it was the question: do I use the music that he used? Do I do different music and use his choreography? Because I was very adamant about really being true to his choreography and his numbers, like really being true. Actually, there's no choreography from me. Even transitions were in the style Bob Fosse's work that we kind of molded together, but we didn't have to do much of that. What was the question?
Just how did you decide where to go with doing the classic versus pulling out something
so
new?
then doing all that stuff and manipulation, then I thought, well, I have to open up with Crunchy Granola. I mean, it says Dancin, even though it's it's old and it's been done, but I thought, okay, my way out of that is I have to orchestrate it in a different way. And if I want to do a rock concert, then I have to make it a rock piece, and then it'll give it another life. So I got through with that. And then it was like, okay, so the monologue I did, Crunchy Granola I sang, Bojangles I sang. So I don't know, I fell into that running order again. And then percussion was after that. So I went, oh, what the hell? I'm going to do percussion. So I was very true to Dancin. And then it kind of bridged out. And then there was this number called Big City Mime, which is in the show now. But it was like, we tried it in Boston for 2 seconds. I think we did it once or twice. And it was cut. But it wasn't a number. It was like a little skit. It was like sketches and vignettes. And it was locations. And it was a man coming into the city, and it was risque and pushing the envelope and all that stuff. And I thought, okay, that's a great opportunity for me to dig into that and kind of like, let's say Bob, when he was a young adolescent, he comes to the city and he experiences this world with, panhandlers and hookers on the street. And so okay, so we do that, and there's a lot of commotion, and I do a reference to Sweet Charity, and then Gotcha with the pimps, and then the whole Liza thing, and that would roll into that and get out of that. And there was a bookstore, so I went into the bookstore, and she's giving him a book, and it's the Book of Alamein, and it's kind of like Pippin, and so I can get into the Pippin world. So long story short, I try to reference all of the stimulus that was in his head that led him to create amazing pieces of theater. So that was my intention for that. So I bridged away, but then I got back into Dancin Man, and I ended the act. I think Dancin Man opened the second act. And then Sing, Sing, Sing opened the third act. So I opened the second act with Sing, Sing, Sing. And then we went from there. And then Here You Come Again. That kind of bridged into that. It was perfect. It was a set change, and the girls had a chance to do a number. And I thought, okay, what the hell do I do with that number? And that went like through 5 or 6 phases. But okay, we got through that. And then I wanted to do that whole romantic fantasy, which was really from Kiss Me Kate, beautiful Bob Fosse, and so I did go off, but I wanted to show his scope of that was Bob danced that and he choreographed that, and it's
Yeah.
fun. Well, I even missed the place with the two guys, and you know, it's called the alley dance, and we explored that. And I don't know. I wanted to do more than what he presented in 1978, and I wanted to show him off for who he was. He would have never done it for himself, that's for sure. So I had this opportunity to kind of honor him, tip my hat, and say, "Hey, this is for you. You did that for me. I'm going to do this for you." That
Do you
kind of
think
thing.
he'd be happy with all the other sides that you get to show in this one, since he couldn't do it himself?
I think so. I don't know if he would admit it, but he was definitely down on himself, and you know, not even others, more about him. It's the insecurity, but also the genius came out of that. So I get it. I get it.
I have to say, one of the things I really loved is just the curtain call, because you've given all of your dancers great credits up on the video screen there, which I don't think I've ever seen. You know, dancers are often just referred to as like one big ensemble.
Right.
Was that a conscious thing you wanted from the start?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
But you know, he did in 1978. We all bowed, and we bowed to a video of ourselves. So you remember that? Or your baby? Anyway, so, but it wasn't the name thing or anything like that. So I thought, he did that. I'm not going to do that. I thought about it, but then I thought, okay, we'll give them individual bows. And then I got to say, Finn Ross is brilliant, the projectionist. And he just flashed, these names came on the LED screen. And I went, yes, this is perfect. And we just kind of went with the flow. And I think it just was it's such a special moment for the 16 of them to get that, because they are all stars and they should have their name in lights. And so I just wanted, again, to honor that.
Yeah, it was great to see. Well, before I wrap up with you, I was looking just at your whole career and everything that I've seen you create over the years. It's really remarkable how many different, varied types of things that you've gotten, like from The Who's Tommy to Wicked and a chorus line, and like it spans so many different genres on stage. So what is kind of your secret sauce for getting to fit into all of these different slots without being ever pigeonholed?
I mean, I often thought about that my whole career, and I thought, wow, I never really found a style that people would say, oh, that's Wayne Cilento. Like that's Bob Fosse. But, and it's so weird. I never really wanted to choreograph. So I love it. I actually do love it. I fell in love with it, but I just wanted to keep dancing, and I wanted to go to Hollywood and be Fred Astaire or Gene Kelly or anyone. I don't care, Donald O'Connor or someone, or Bob Fosse. And that wasn't going to happen. So I started choreographing. And I think my thing just happened. I mean, I don't know if it was intentional. Every vehicle that got into my hands was a different period, a different style. So I researched and I did everything I can do for, say, Tommy. And Tommy was like, they said to me, we don't want to see any choreography at all. No choreography. I went, oh, okay, fine. So it was all built on mannerisms and attitude and character and body language. And, just the bob of the head kind of was a number. I mean, ridiculous, but I loved it. It was great. And then at the end of La Jolla, they said to me, now you can expand on the choreography. So then I did Sensation and I did Pinball Wizard and stuff like that. So anyway, so that was that. And then How to Succeed, it was like, okay, what do I do for How to Succeed? And Bob did How to Succeed, but he didn't really do any choreography. He just did staging, and it was like a style. And I thought, okay, well, I could build on that. And then Aida was completely another thing. And so get into the Native American, get into Egyptians, everything I did was something different. And I just had to constantly stretch myself and go, okay, I'm not comfortable in that. I don't want to do that again. So I've got to find something else. Even the last thing that I choreographed on Broadway was Holler If You Hear Me, which was, you know, rock. I mean, not rock. It was like, you know, rap and street dancing. And I didn't even want professional dancers. I just wanted street dancers. And so I would shape and mold that into choreography. And I had a great time with that. So I don't know. I don't know what happened to me.
Well, what happened was a great career that you've been able
Yeah.
to keep
Yeah.
quite varied over the years. So it's really wonderful to see continues with this fantastic work with this revival of Dancin. If you're
Thank
out
you.
there watching, make sure you subscribe to Gold Derby. Keep up to date with us this season. Wayne, thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice meeting you. This is great.